Chane Griggs. Chane, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Sorry, we're running a few minutes late. We'll give you that same 10 minutes. And I hope do you happen to have the questions with you that we had sent?
I sure do.
Excellent. So you can do a brief introduction to yourself, run into those questions, then we'll open it up for the audience. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Chane Griggs. I moved to Salem in 1977 from North Carolina. I have lived here continuously since then. I am a lifelong Democrat. I have worked most all of my adult life. I've raised my children here. There was a period of time for about 4 years where I was a single parent of 3 very young children. Began working at the state because I needed to find a job that would provide benefits and a good salary for me. I most recently retired from the state as the assistant director for the Department of Corrections. And in my role, I managed all of the reformative work for the 14 prisons. So think of the positive touches, workforce training, education, religious services. The research unit was under my division. After retiring from that career, then after a few months, I went to work as the regional director for the Oregon Community Foundation, which gave me great exposure and working relationships with area nonprofits in our 3-county region. I'm running because I think Salem can do a little bit better job than we're doing. It was not a position that I sought. This has not been on a career path for me, but members from the community from both sides of the aisle have seen me work in my role on Planning Commission and other civic committees and understand that I do have an ability to bring different opinions to the table to find the middle of the conversation and moving us forward on issues. So I do have the gift of time now that I'm really retired, and I have a deep love for my city, which is why I'm running. Briefly summarize my 3 top policy issues. It is the homeless issue for sure. I love how the micro shelters are working. It's a great approach for the low barrier shelters. It is a fact we cannot build our way out of the homeless issue. So my strategy is to look strategically at the programming and treatment that we're providing in these low barrier shelters to ensure that we're using evidence-based programming and treatment to the best that we can, so we can more effectively and efficiently move individuals through those low barrier shelters and then on to more successful independent living. Affordable housing is another issue. And Aileen, I will take your pledge. I promise not to undermine any of the current land use laws. There is no need to do that. With my role on Planning Commission, I'm fully aware that we have buildable land for the next 20 years within the UGB, in large part because of the changes that we've employed on our Salem project, rezoning some areas so that we can allow more dense building, less setbacks. So, those kind of policy issues, we don't have a need to look at expanding our urban growth boundary. And lastly, public safety, to look at our partners in both the police and the fire, but more specifically with the police, to ensure that their work is transparent and accountable as they try to keep our communities safe. So those are my top 3. My skills and lived experience, I'm a parent of a child who has mental health issues and has since she was 13, even given the fact that I thought that I was connected enough to know where resources were. It was a challenge. So the community resources for mental health is a huge issue. And it's imperative that we provide more of those on the front end rather than dealing with the issues in our incarcerated population and our homeless population. Also, skills. I have a lot of civic involvement on city committees. I chaired the budget committee. I was on the historic landmarks committee, the Parks and Rec Advisory Board committee, the Public Arts Committee. Currently, I'm president of Planning Commission. I've held that role for about 3 years. I've been on Planning Commission for 5. And I'm currently president of our Rotary Club of Salem, the club that gets things done downtown, like the amphitheater. And I'm the vice president of the Capital Planning Commission. So I have leadership roles on different levels of our state government, which I think positions me well to do that. I've volunteered a lot of hands-on work with our Rotary Club, including Marion Polk Food Share, doing actual ground moving for Deepwood and those kind of activities. my work with, as I mentioned, with DOC is reformative, and I did see the value of employing research to ensure that we're doing the best work possible. So every 2 years, you know, as the lobbyist basically for Department of Corrections, I would have to go in front of Ways and Means and show that the programs we were doing were actually working, that we were using taxpayer dollars wisely and to the best of our ability. So I would translate that into the programming and treatment that we're providing for our unsheltered population. Why do I feel I'm the strongest Democratic candidate to win the general election? I think I'm uniquely qualified because I've spent 40 years working, volunteering in our community, working at the state, working in our region with nonprofits. I'm the only candidate who is advocating to work with our nonprofit partners to determine best practices in that programming and treatment that we're providing. And in my past role as legislative liaison and the statewide legislative coordinator with DAS and the legislative coordinator for the Department of Corrections, I have extensive knowledge and experience with the legislative process and have really good working relationships at the state and actually in the county. My closing statement, how fast am I doing this? As I mentioned, I feel like I'm qualified to lead our city moving forward to address the issues that our community faces, whether it's developing more strategies to remedy the homeless issue or looking for opportunities to provide affordable housing for those choosing to live and work in Salem, and supporting our public safety partners to ensure that they have the resources to keep us safe. And with that, I believe I've answered your questions. Oh, and I have voted in every election and every special election in the past 10 years. Point.
Okay.
I'm ready for questions.
All right. All right. Let's open it up to the audience for questions for Chane. Mary Ann.
Well, hi, Chane, and thank you for running. One of the things that I'm starting to become more aware of, especially as we do see the need for more housing, and is building taller buildings in Salem, apartment buildings, as we're watching all the films from Ukraine and seeing all the apartment buildings. And then if we realize with all our earthquake stuff that, well, Los Angeles and San Francisco sure have some pretty tall buildings and they've had quite a history of earthquakes. So what's the possibility of actually building taller buildings so that we would have more housing?
Yeah, I love that question, Mary Ann. And you know, I didn't mean to cut you off. So if there's a second part to that question, go ahead and lay it out there.
But that also means that more services need to be available close by to those kind of taller buildings. So grocery stores and bus routes and medical services, and as well as restaurants and fun places to go.
Right. So there are a couple of angles on that. Some of the code changes that we've proposed to City Council from Planning Commission in the Our Salem project address that issue perfectly. So on the major corridors within a quarter mile of Chariot bus routes, so think of Lancaster, Commercial, Center Street as examples, but there are other major corridors. So we've changed those zoning to allow more dense housing. So we've eliminated a lot of the setbacks. We've expanded the height maximums for those buildings. So you will see more dense housing, more taller options on those major corridors. You mentioned being closer to services. So another proposal that we have are those neighborhood hubs. And surprisingly, we got a lot of pushback from some of the areas of Salem not wanting those neighborhood hubs. But it's important to know that where we have suggested that they be sited, it's not a requirement that they build a neighborhood hub there. It's just that land would be suitable for a neighborhood hub. And that would allow people to be able to walk to the grocery store, walk to, you know, a bookstore, walk in rather than drive. Another great thing on the affordable housing and the more dense housing, the Front Street, which is the old Truett property, we've rezoned that also to allow multifamily mixed use. So you're going to see a combination of uses more densely on that corridor, hopefully not too far down the road. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking that.
Thanks, Mary Ann. Aileen?
I'll be very brief since Chane was kind enough to already answer my question. And I just wanted to thank you all for bearing with me asking everybody the same question. Thank you.
You're welcome, Aileen.
Marcia? Marcia, are you muted?
I'm gonna have to do it on Victor's because I fell off the Zoom.
Oh, okay. Well, welcome back. Ask away.
Chane, can you tell me what part of the community is supporting you with monetary contributions, and what family is the biggest donor to your campaign?
I have contributions. Thank you for the question, Marcia and Victor. I have contributions from across Salem. I have contributions from individuals. As of last week, 60% of my contributions have come from individuals, 12% have come from development, and I think that's probably where you're targeting your question. And I am comfortable with those donations. The biggest family, I'm trying to think, and I'll tell you why I'm comfortable with that in just a second. It probably would be Dick Withnell, I think. I'd have to go back and look, but that would probably be, I've had out-of-state money, but like $1,000 from my mother, and I don't think that really counts. So the importance, I think the lens that we need to look at, development is painted with a certain brush and not always in a positive light. Keep in mind that these folks, the Dick Withnells, the Mountain West, these are the partners, these private dollar partners that are making contributions to our community to make it a livable community. They have partnered with the project on the State Street North, or the Center Street North Side State Hospital campus. Those were private dollars. The Cornerstone Apartments out on Portland Road, which are medium barrier, they partnered on that. They're partnering at the Y. Rich Duncan is partnering, giving time and money to the Center for Hope and Safety. So when you say development, they do give me money. I have progressives that have given me money. I've got Republicans that have given me money. I've got lots of middle of the road people. I have friends from 40 years that have given me money, but I think it's important to see that their impact, their positive impact also to our community.
Okay, thank you. Scott?
Yes, I wondered if you could comment on a general feeling among many that you actually lean Republican, despite you're saying that you are a lifelong Democrat. And part of this is from data looking at who you and your husband have been contributing to, which is predominantly a variety of very conservative and Republican candidates.
Mm-hmm.
And your association with the Third Bridge movement, which had Chuck Adams as an agent working on that. So I wondered if you could comment on that.
Yes, I'd be glad to. Thank you, Scott, for your question. It's surprising to me in the year 2022 that this type of question would even be asked. And why I say that is there are couples out there, ours included, where a husband may have a different opinion than the wife and vice versa. So the candidates that I have personally contributed to have been Democrats. The candidates that my husband contributes to generally are Republicans. You're absolutely right. He's actually an independent, but they're Republicans. Just because I'm married to my husband does not mean that my political views are aligned with my husband. So I don't know how to make that any clearer. I will hit on another related topic because I think another thought that is floating out there is that I am not a lifelong Democrat. I am. And what happened in the spring is I went to renew my driver's license. And with the new state bill, you have to select a party affiliation. I didn't see that box. I barely passed the vision test. So they default and give you a nonpartisan designation. So when I was made aware of that, I went back and said, could you, and he said to me, did you just renew your driver's license? And I said, yes. And he goes, this is happening a lot. So I have been a lifelong Democrat. My endorsements go across the border. I have Senate President Courtney endorsing me and giving me money. I have former State Treasurer Jim Hill giving me money and endorsing me. I have, on the other side, I have Representative Raquel Moore Green. So I've got all the living mayors in Oregon, Salem mayors endorsing me, and they span the political spectrum. So I think it's a reflection on my ability to bring diverse groups together to arrive at a consensus. But back to your main question, Scott, I am a lifelong Democrat.
Thank you, Chane. Mary.
Hello, thank you for being here, Chane. We appreciate your taking your time. My question goes back to something you mentioned earlier about the homelessness and not being able to build our way out of it. And that therefore treatment centers are like the old school way of doing it. I know that there's a number of people who need treatments and such, but we don't have enough housing, period. That's it. I'm a real estate agent. We don't have enough housing. So how are you going to do it if you don't build your way out of it? Because there's always going to be a percentage of people without a house when you don't have enough housing.
Right. So are you talking about the homeless population housing issue or just housing in general?
There'll be more and more homeless as we have less and less affordable housing. Rents are currently going up $15 a month at this rate. Housing is becoming completely unaffordable. There's nothing you can buy for under 300,000 that isn't a tear down. So how are we going to do anything about housing if we don't build housing?
Right. So there, I kind of hear two different issues. So my comment was related to the houseless population, the unsheltered population. We cannot afford to build 1,500 shelter units for the unhoused. But we can't even cite, we're having a hard time citing, 2 micro shelters, much less the 4 to 6 that we're anticipating that we need. So that was my comment about that. So my solution to that is the programming that's provided at those micro shelters. How do we more efficiently, effectively provide that in hopes that those individuals can then move on to more independent housing? Affordable housing generally is a huge issue. I think what's going to help with that is a little bit of a paradigm shift. So one example is the Community Land Trust. We finally approved the first rezoning on Planning Commission to allow a community land trust proposal in Salem. And that's kind of at the top end of affordable housing. And what happens in this case is a nonprofit holds the land, owns the land. The nonprofit enters into a long-term lease with an individual that meets a certain median income level. And so the cost of the home to enter into home ownership is literally the cost of the home and not the land. So it's a great proposal. We've got some of our local philanthropic contributors to our community looking at those proposals. Also, what's going to help with that is now that we've got the House bill that's allowing the middle housing to be developed on single family residential, that will help. We've already approved the accessory dwelling, the tiny homes accessory dwelling units, but having the middle housing being built on single family lots, and so that would be duplex, tri, quad, cottage clusters, will also go a long way to help provide more affordable housing. But it's a juggernaut. It's definitely a Gordian knot to untie. But a lot of different approaches need to be at the table.
Thank you, Chane. Jennifer.
Can I just do a real quick follow-up?
Sure, Mary.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. I do have here's just a general question for you. And it's more of a philosophy question. Do you see the homeless issue as something that we need to deal with because businesses and people that aren't homeless feel affronted by homeless people, or because homeless people deserve a place to live?
I think it's inhumane the way that we're allowing individuals without shelters to live on our streets. It's not healthy for them. It's not leading them to a more productive lifestyle. So I think it's our responsibility as city leaders to identify the avenues that we can help individuals move through and become independent and contributing members to our society. They need shelter. Some of them need just shelter. Some of them need more than that. And it's our responsibility to identify those needs.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Mary. Jennifer, take it away. This will be our last question too, because we're just about out of time.
What is your stance on the environment and climate change?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Jennifer. I served on the Climate Action Task Force representing the Planning Commission. I think generally overall, it's a good plan. I think it's a doable plan. The majority of the strategies are incentive-based. The one thing, if you do your research, you'll see that I did push back on the ban on natural gas. And the reason why I did that is I feel that there are some real unintended consequences when you say that our lower income families who are relying on natural gas because it is a more affordable source of energy, that they can no longer use that. And in addition, they're going to need to retrofit their house to allow for electricity to be their source of heat. I think it's just an issue that I don't think we need to present to our populations. But most of the strategies that and through the whole conversation, I was advocating, we need to take a page from the playbook of the car industry. They've done such a wonderful job incentivizing individuals to move to electric vehicles. So how do we get people engaged and excited about moving away from natural gas in their homes and in their businesses to do that? So there's some great strategies, Jennifer. I don't know if you want details, but that's my take on it.
Thank you, Chane. I don't see any more questions. I would like to ask you to wrap it up in one firm minute, a 60-second minute, not the same one that Richard had.
I think I gave you that already.
Okay.
When I went through all my questions, I ended with my 60-minute, and I think
you did. There was one right there. Okay, I heard it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much for joining us, Chane. We really appreciate you running and you taking the time to be with us tonight. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank
I'm
you.
going to quickly share my screen here and give you all a quick update. In addition to all of the